here. All right, we are now recording.
Thanks, Lance.
Thanks, Lance. At the top of your screen, you should see a toolbar. And on the right-hand side of that toolbar, you should see a little thing that says Annotate with a pencil. For those of you who see the Annotate with a pencil, I'm going to invite you to click on that. And then you will see something that says Stamp with a check mark. And when you see that, you can click any of these little stamp friends that you like. There's an arrow, there's a check mark, there's a star. And we just want to know, where are you at with seed saving? All right, I see Jocelyn is on it. Do you have no experience? Have you tried it? Are you pretty confident at seed saving? Or are you someone that saves seasonally? You're sort of rolling on the seed saving. I see Tim with a check mark at have tried. Golden Hills says pretty confident. I'm gonna say save seasonally. Okay. What do you want, Alex? In between?
Keep me pretty confident.
Okay, we're putting Alex at pretty confident. Okay, anyone else? Remember, it's at the top toolbar, Annotate. And then view options, Annotate, and then click your little stamp that you want. We'll just give like 2 more seconds to see. Oh, I saw a heart at pretty confident. I see Diane chiming in here.
Chat. Let me see if anyone else is safe seasonally. Or sorry.
Someone says, I don't see the Annotate. View options. Is it at the bottom? It's at the top. It should say view options and then Annotate. You can type in the chat what you want also, if you can't find it. All right, Michelle says, I have tried saving seeds. It was fun and want to know more. Awesome. Anyone else? Maggie, I see you with some little dots next to have tried. Okay, cool. Thanks for trying that. Lance says it's under view options, Annotate, click stamp. Some folks have little marks over by none. No seed saving experience. That's okay. We're so glad you're here. We're just kind of getting a gauge here of where everybody's at in your seed saving journey. There's always something to learn every single growing season. So, okay, we are going to go ahead and move on. I'm going to clear this out. Yes. Here we go. Okay. We are going to go to the next one. All right, so we have some wonderful folks here. A couple of you already introduced yourself in the chat. Let's go ahead and do that. Please introduce yourself in the chat if you're able. Tell us maybe where you're from and your favorite seed. Let's see who we have in the room, what your favorite seed is.
Well, maybe while people are taking a minute to write down, we can go ahead and introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
So my name's Alex O'Hanlon. I'm from Omaha. And my favorite seed is constantly changing, but I was going to say, like, my favorite, maybe not like thing to grow, but my favorite seed is a zinnia seed because it kind of looks like an arrowhead and they have tails on them. And I spent a lot of time this year really learning how to process zinnia seeds. So that's what I'm going to say is my favorite seed, but I don't want people thinking that's my favorite thing to grow. Okay. Just my favorite seed.
Just your favorite seed. Awesome.
I want to be clear.
Yeah. So I'm Cait, and we can also talk about where you work if you want to, Alex. And because I forgot to mention that already.
Yeah, I guess so. I work at One Omaha, which we do a lot of support for community organizers in Omaha. But I have done a lot of farming in the past and have been hosting seed school with Cait since 2019, and I just I love thriving neighborhoods and thriving resilient food systems. So that's why I'm here tonight.
So I'm Cait. I work at the Center for Rural Affairs. You can find more info about us at cfra.org. So we're representing 3 awesome organizations this evening. I'm also a farmer myself. And at the center, I serve as the beginning farmer and market associate. So I do a lot of beginning farmer work. So if anyone here is a beginning farmer in Iowa or Nebraska, or even regionally, reach out to me. I would love to get to know you and chat with you and learn about your farm. I am a seed and prairie nerd who loves learning and teaching. That is why I'm constantly here. I'm seeing some amazing responses. We have acorn lovers. We have prairie plant, rattlesnake master, compass plant, prairie clover, tomatoes. Do you want to read some?
What else we got? Having done some seed saving and harvesting. Any native prairie seed is my favorite. Red oak, resilient farms. The seeds I've most successfully saved are German flatleaf kale and marigolds. Wow, good. Favorite prairie plant is rattlesnake master, so I want to save that seed.
Awesome. Rhea from Lions. Coneflowers. Also worked for Center for Rural Affairs. Yes, those pokey coneflower seeds, we always joke about processing those and how they make you bleed and cry. So yeah, coneflowers.
Great.
All right. We have Iroquois white flower corn. Wow. And yellow watermelon. We have not sure what the favorite seed is. Saved tomatoes. They're easy. Amaranth from Angelina. Illinois bundleflower. Yes. Prairie mimosa is what I call that plant. I don't know if anyone else knows it as prairie mimosa, but recently I found out that not a lot of people call it prairie mimosa. Again, it's a colloquial common name, so we can get a little tricky there with not the scientific name, but yes.
So Michelle says, thought this would be more about gardening seeds, but want to know more about prairie seeds. So we're going to talk about both.
Yes.
So no worries there.
Pumpkin seeds are my favorite. I'm from Community Gardens in Honolulu. Welcome. Woo. Your weather is quite different than ours. We're happy to have you. Loving to collect seeds from their plot. And seed saving experience in the tropics. Moringa was cool. Prairie seeds from Justin. Awesome. If you are able, I hope you're reading along to all these great answers here. Thank you so much for participating, letting us know about your favorite seeds. It's making me excited. Okay, let's keep going. So I'm just going to give a little quick overview of what we're going to cover this evening and then what's going to happen in the next session. Because just so you all sort of know kind of what's going on tonight, we're not going to have time again. This is like a lightning version of what we usually do, which is almost 3 days. So we're not really going to get to talk about everything, but we're trying out this format as we're going into the growing season, just like feeling like we really want to help folks get ready and prepared for planning their seed saving garden. So tonight I'm gonna start us off here by talking a little bit about the story of seeds and just seeds in general, and just helping you ruminate on what a seed is and things like that. We're gonna go through what are just the basic steps or these questions that Alex and I really think are important for seed saving. So what you need to ask yourself going into seed saving. We're gonna talk about kind of 2 different purposes for potentially getting into seed saving, or what your like outcome is essentially, or kind of what you're going for. There's sort of 2 main categories. Talk a little bit about your garden and what you need, and then we're gonna we're gonna take a little mini break, and we're gonna do a little bit of dry processing. So that's tonight. I'm not gonna read through what we're gonna do on the second, but go ahead and look through that. We're gonna try to cover those topics on the second one. we will answer questions related to these things, but there might be a time where you have like a breeding question, let's say, or you want to know more about germination tests or how to store seeds. We might say, hey, that's actually going to be in the next class just for time's sake. So I'm just throwing that out to you all. You also should have received an email with handouts. And so in those handouts, those really cover everything. One is called Basic Seed Saving Principles that Alex put together. It's really wonderful. It's like a distillation again of sort of all these educational materials we've put together. So if you do have questions on other topics, go ahead and give that a read, look through that. And, I always like to say in my classes, like, after you get off, curl up in your bed and do some more seed saving reading before you fall asleep. So go for that. So this is what we're going over tonight, is just kind of this first category. Okay. So we're going to do a little bit more engagement here with you all. We're just going to talk briefly about why would you save seeds? So it sounds like a lot of you have had some experience saving seeds. It sounds like you all have reasons for why you're saving seed. There's so many different reasons. I think even Alex and I would say mine's kind of like evolving each season, why or what my goals are. I like all of the answers that we've written on this page, but there's just so many reasons. So maybe I'll just talk a little bit about kind of like why I save seed or how I come to seed saving, and then you can, and then we'll invite you to sort of write in the chat here. I'm going to go ahead and read this quote by Rowan White, who is an incredible Indigenous seed saver and just like seed activist. And if you have a moment to like read anything she's ever written, I'm just really going to strongly encourage that you do that. But she says, each one of us descends from people who have been in an intimate and reciprocal relationship with plants and seeds since the dawning of time. For me, I live in a prairie ecosystem, a prairie bioregion of the Les Hills. And so, yeah, I'm really into preservation, or that's what I think feels really important to me, is like this idea of preserving that really fragile ecosystem and being in relationship with it. And then similarly for like the foods that I want to eat, I want to have this relationship with the full process, the whole life cycle of that plant. So from all the, so from planting and starting the seeds all the way to when I harvest the seed, and then it becomes a new generation and I can plant it the following year. And then, also for me, saving money, and having access is so important. Knowing that my kids will have access to seeds I'm saving, they'll have access to food and seeds they can plant. So those are kind of some of the things. Yeah. Do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I would say mine are pretty similar. I think a lot about, my cousin is also really into farming, and we were talking about how we know that our great grandpa, he farmed a lot. Our grandpa, he didn't start to garden until he was in his 60s. Our parents gardened a little bit, but then my cousin and I, coming into our 20s, we got really, really interested in gardening. All of a sudden, the whole family's gardening again. Everybody's like, well, I helped grandpa. So kind of this thing of like carrying on these family traditions, and like hopefully somewhere down the line, my great grandpa will, have descendants that are gardening 7, 10, 20 generations later. So carrying on that lineage, but not just the one familial lineage, but rather like just the lineage of like all of us together doing these different things, saving different things in different parts of the world. And that kind of gets into like the, for like the delicacy of it, like, oh yeah, it's really great to have, like, for example, San Marzano tomatoes make amazing sauce, very expensive to buy. So to be able to like produce the things, be able to produce that sauce, to also produce the seeds that then bear fruit that you process into that sauce also feels really special. And then like, just to be like really on the nose about it, I don't think you can have resilient food systems without having resilient seed saving systems, especially as we think about, drought and extreme weather. Having seeds that are adapted to the climate that you're in is really, really important, and to keep adapting those seeds as the climates, change and fluctuate is also really important. And I also just think that like through seed saving, building community, it's also an art form of the like direct, like how do we process these seeds, but also how do we create community around processing those seeds. So just a couple of things. Basically, I'm obsessed. I don't know.
I think we can both like leave it at that. Basically, I'm obsessed.
We're obsessed.
But yeah, I mean, I want to talk about a lot of the ones you said, and we're going to get into the regionally adapted here in a second when we talk about seed sourcing, which is like your first step, right, in your seed saving journey. Like, where am I going to get seed? I need seed. So we'll get into that in a second. But the last one that you said, I want to highlight, it's like, even though we are here in this virtual reality this evening, all summer and fall, there were seed processing gatherings happening in Omaha that Alex and other folks put together and bottom lined. And really, in order to process seed, you need a lot of hands. You need a lot of people. So something I love about it, like just to go a little deeper, is like in farming, we've really, glorified that individualistic model of farming. Whereas like, if you want to be a seed saver, if you really want to produce your own seed, you got to have a crew to come out to your farm and do it. I had an experience of trying to harvest like a really large quantity of arugula seed one time. And like, we had to have like multiple parties in order to get it done. And there had to be like threshing and winnowing and like, and even packaging if you have a bulk seed. There's equipment to do things like this, but I think that's one of the beautiful things is that it sort of reinvites the community aspect, I think. So I think that's really cool. I'm going to go ahead here and say just highlight a couple in the chat here. I'm seeing regionally adapted seeds. Yes. Restore native ecosystems to counter corporate domination of our food system. Yes. We're going to talk about patents in our second one. We're going to get into that. Yes, harvesting from my plot, things that are more resilient to pests. So keeping that eye on, making sure that you're having healthy crops, the art of it.
Also, seed processing is always just an excuse to have a party.
Yes.
So I just want to throw that out there.
Yes, get your friends, get your community together. Wanting to have the largest butternut squashes. So that's selection.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to talk about that more in the second session. But one thing I heard, and actually Rowan White said this, like, if you are engaged in the practice and the art of seed saving, you are a plant breeder. And for time immemorial, human beings have had this relationship with seeds, and we are breeders. Like, we are relating with the plants and constantly selecting for what we want. And
seed saving,
that's really cool.
Seed saving predates agriculture.
Yeah. Yes. These are great answers. Thank you for those who were willing to share. It's awesome. All right. We are gonna move on. So again, I'm gonna try to do a little time check here, trying to see where we're at. We are gonna take a break at the top of the hour, so just kind of want to check in where we're at. Thanks again for sharing. Alex and I had the opportunity to work with an organization that I think I highlighted in the resource called Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance. There are amazing groups out there that are committed to seed saving and seed stewarding. And I think it's just important for us to like take a minute and recognize like the culture of colonialism and cultural appropriation and oppression and all of those things, and how they play a role in like all of our systems, but specifically agriculture. So I kind of wanted to just start that off. When we're talking about seeds, I think it's really important for us to remember that a lot of seeds have been stolen, just like the land that we're living on. They've been taken out of the hands of the communities that they belong to, where they were shared freely and openly. No one had ownership over those things. And so I think it's just important for us to sort of start out with that and to think about how sacred seeds really are. They are and have the ability to self-replicate. They can create themselves, which is something that we don't have any other real technology like that. They are living, even though they are dormant. a lot of the time, and before we are providing them with soil temperature and moisture and heat, the warmth of the soil and the warmth of earth, you know, they are dormant, but they are also living just like other species. So I think it's really cool to just think about where our seeds have come from, you know, even if like as you're like looking through a seed catalog, like thinking about like who stewarded these seeds, you know, how did they get here, where did they come from, and we're going to talk about sourcing your seeds, but I think it's really important to I think just like it's another way in your life to be intentional about where you're sourcing things from and whose seeds those are and things like that. So just kind of a little reflection. Again, very tip of the iceberg. I think we spent like half of a whole session sort of chatting about this, doing some fun workshops in our extended seed school. But, and then these seeds actually here are orca beans in the picture that I had the opportunity to grow out for a season that were from the Meskwaki in eastern Iowa. So those are really, really cool bean. All right, seed sourcing. Hopefully I'm not passing it to you. So
Okay.
I'm not chatting so much. Let's talk a little bit about seed sourcing. As we mentioned earlier, when we're thinking about why are we saving seed, this is something that I think I didn't really, I have a farming background and I'd go to Johnny's and I'd get all my seeds because I was like, first of all, Johnny's, I can buy big quantities. That's what I need for my farm. And they have the varieties that every market farmer is growing. So, you know, this is all I'm thinking. I have this like tunnel vision about seeds when I'm first starting out as a farmer. Thankfully, through education and being around community and learning things, I was able to understand how important it is for me to use regionally adapted seeds. So seeds that have actually been grown out in my bioregion or as close to where I live as possible. And that's we're not only talking about native plants, we're also talking about food plants. And so we have here just a couple, I guess, recommendations, and I'm going to let you chime in too, Alex, to talk about like your favorites and why and stuff like that. But I really love the Buffalo Seed Company. I love their seed. It's amazing. Also, we don't work for any of these companies. And Meadowlark Hearth Farms is in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. And I know we both have, we've grown out a lot of their seed. And they are our only certified organic, certified biodynamic seed farm in the state of Nebraska currently, which I think points to what we were talking about earlier, whereas you were talking about how do we have a secure food system? Well, we can't have it if we don't have seed sources. So just to put into perspective, for Nebraska,
they host a big opportunity out on their farm every September to process seed.
Yeah.
So not only are they the only organic biodynamic seed saving farm in Nebraska, they also do invite the community to participate in that process.
Absolutely. Yeah. Seed Savers Exchange is probably one that folks are familiar with. They're in Decorah, out of Decorah, Iowa, really large, have a great conference. There was a really awesome webinar today. We're going to talk about some offerings that they have later in the workshop. And then another one actually at PFI. I met them at PFI, I think, not last year, but the year before, is Nature and Nurture out of Ann Arbor. So those are some really awesome, closer to home opportunities. We're going to go over these terms as well, but when you are looking for seeds that you specifically want to save, so you're like, I'm going to get this seed, I'm going to source it, I want to put it in my garden, you need to look for open pollinated heirloom seeds. So that's what you're looking for. We're not going to get a lot into the nitty gritty of patents, but it's really important that an heirloom is something that is going to, this next generation, when you're saving those seeds, it's going to produce what we call a true to type seed. So it's going to be exactly what you planted. We're going to talk more about this. So if this is like a new concept for you, some of you, I feel like it's not, that's okay. But if this is a new thing, an heirloom is something that when you plant it and then you properly harvest the seed, you're going to, the next time you plant it, get that same plant. All right, we'll talk about it more. Okay. We have some other sources down here. These are just also companies I really love. Native Seeds, True Love Seeds. I've been growing True Love just for 1 year and I love them. They do amazing stuff. They have this like African diaspora collection that's like so cool. And they're young farmers. They're young seed farmers. So I'm just gonna like shout out to them. I really like High Mowing. Again, they have a wide selection of organic. Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I have gotten some seed through Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance.
Yeah.
But a lot of that is going to be like high desert sort of regionally adapted seeds, but sometimes it's, you know, you can start with stuff like that, save it for a few years and it'll become adapted here. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange is from like the Mid-Atlantic region, but they have a lot of great seed saving resources and they also have some really great stuff to look at. One thing that's great about like Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, as well as Seed Savers and Meadowlark Hearth and Buffalo Seed Company, they're all open pollinated. You don't have to, whereas like High Mowing or Johnny's, you can buy seed from them, but you, depending on what you're trying to do, you got to look a little closer to make sure this variety is the open pollinated variety. So that's one reason I really like Southern Exposure Seed Exchange as well. And they also have a really great seed saving guide on their website. So I'd say that's kind of where my heart lies when it comes to buying seed.
Awesome. Feel free, if you are a seed sourcer, saver, you have anything that we missed on here that you feel like folks should know about, because I always like to say, I'm not an expert, I'm a learner. And I think we both feel that way. So anything that you also want to share, go right ahead. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
We're gonna just sourcing your seeds. So we have some thoughts on that. If anybody has questions on sourcing seeds, we can come back to that. So go ahead and put those in the chat. But now I think we're just gonna move on and sort of talk through.
I guess I just want to real quick for sourcing seeds, talk about getting seeds from like a seed share.
Yes.
Because that is where I get a lot of seeds too. So there is a seed share coming up in Omaha on March 5th, and we have more information about that at the end of the slideshow. But at that seed share, there's going to be some seed that Cait and I have saved, and so it's all going to be open pollinated, and it's going to be very clearly marked. But a lot of times when you go to a seed share, I think one thing that we probably noticed a few years ago was that there wasn't a lot of locally safe seed available at seed shares. And that's, I think, one place that both Cait and I came from, of being like, all right, let's do this. Let's attend whatever information, you know, let's get whatever information we need to get and then share it with as many people as possible. And let's bulk up the store of locally safe seed that we have in, you know, Eastern Nebraska, Western Iowa. And so we'll talk a lot more about that and the efforts that we've been taking to do that in the second class. But just to get back to, a lot of times you go to a seed share locally, there's not a lot of local seed. What you'll find is a lot of seeds from different companies. And usually seed shares do a good job of getting seed from reputable sources. But a lot of times they'll get seed from like Johnny's. Johnny's is great. They have really great high quality seed that create really great high quality vegetables, but a lot of them are hybrids. So when you're at a seed share, you just want to always be sure, if you're getting seed to try to save, especially if you're trying to preserve a variety, you want to make sure that you're getting something that's open pollinated or an heirloom. So if something's a hybrid on the seed package, it'll say F1. And so if you see F1, you can totally plant that seed, but just know that saving that seed is going to be a different experience, a much harder experience than if you get an open pollinated variety. If you see something on the seed package that says open pollinated or heirloom, then you're going to know that that is going to be something that you can get seed that's true to type in 1 year. So when you're sourcing seed from seed shares, you definitely can get seed for seed saving, but you're just going to want to be maybe a little more, like have a little more scrutiny than maybe you've had at seed chairs in the past. And sometimes the people at the tables will be able to help you. But sometimes, you know, there'll be people that are interns at a place, so they might not always be able to help provide that information. And if you find seeds, you know, a lot of times if you get seeds from Burpee or Johnny's and say they don't have the package there, you can probably assume that those are hybrids. Whereas if you see something from Seed Savers Exchange or Baker Creek, you can assume that those are open pollinated. I just want to throw that out there. I don't know if that muddied the waters more or made it easier, but that's something to keep in mind when you're heading out to seed chairs.
Can I throw a little example?
Yeah, yeah.
So just on that note, I want to highlight, I am currently playing the Johnny's catalog. I'm gonna try my best here to from this season. And for those of you that are ordering seed, I'm just gonna go ahead. If you have access to doing that online, oftentimes they have the tabs where you can just select heirloom. It's only gonna pull up what is an heirloom. So if you're gonna save seed from any type of plant that you wanna save seed, you can go ahead and just highlight that. But I just wanna say that they're making it a lot harder in the cat. They don't even have the patents on the pages anymore.
Yeah.
So just note, flip through whatever catalogs you have or whatever. So this is like a bean page here. And on this bean page, out of all of these ones that are just on this page, there's only one that's an heirloom. So everything else is a hybrid. And the only way that you can actually see that is if you read the description. So it's like essentially in the fine print here. So it is something to kind of,
and that's for Johnny.
and this is for Johnny's specifically, okay? And then the other thing that's really important is, again, to just look for patented seed, and usually catalogs will put that out there. But I guess all I'm saying is that sometimes you have to do a little digging to kind of find what you're looking for here, unless you're sourcing from a company that's like, we are 100% heirloom.
Yeah, so I feel like we should talk a little bit more about definitions. And then if we've got any questions in the chat, we can go ahead and take them. Okay, so first of all, a hybrid is a plant or a variety created by crossing two stable, genetically distinct. A hybrid is when you cross two plants together. And so the two plants that you're crossing together are going to be really, really different. Like one will be a yellow tomato that grows really tall. And the other plant might be a cherry tomato that is really compact. And when you cross, and so they're going to be very different, have very different genetics. They're both tomatoes, but they have very different, they express very different genes. So when you cross those, the reason people love hybrids is because you can get really productive, uniform plants out of that. And so say you cross that tall yellow tomato and the compact cherry, and what you get is you call them sweet banana cherries because they're compact yellow cherry tomato plants. And so the thing is that the reason that it's going to be the resulting seed that shows up inside of that yellow cherry tomato is going to have so many different crosses that if you save seed from that one yellow cherry, you'll get an orange tomato, you'll get a tall yellow cherry, you'll get a short orange cherry, you'll get something that looks more like aroma, because there's just so much of the different genetics from different tomatoes because they're so widely different. So hybrids are great, and they can be great to, you can dehybridize things, and they could be a great way to start to create a new type of seed. But when you're trying to preserve a variety, you're not going to be able to preserve a hybrid variety in just 1 year. So that gets us to open pollinated, and open pollinated seeds are seeds that have crossed themselves. So they have been pollinated by either wind or bugs, or and so they've been pollinated by either wind or bugs. And so open pollinated varieties, because they've generally been, so to have a certain variety of seed, you need to save it for at least 7 generations. So if you're buying something that is an open pollinated variety, that means that it's going to be a stable open pollinated variety. So it's something that these plants have been naturally crossing for the last at least 7 years. And so what's happened is that somebody, say, has saved all the seeds that produced pink tomatoes for 7 generations and just keep letting seeds that produce plants that produce pink tomatoes cross with each other. So what you're getting is a lot of uniformity in that population. So if you buy an open pollinated seed and it produces plants that make pink tomatoes and you save seed from those tomatoes, you will get seed that produces plants that produce more pink tomatoes with seeds inside of them that produce more pink tomatoes. So a great place to start with seed saving is trying to preserve a variety. And if you want to preserve a variety, you want to start with an open pollinated variety. Now, an heirloom is an open pollinated cultivar that has been saved for 50 years. So it's a very stable open pollinated variety. So those are a little bit of the seed saving terms. Any questions on that?
You also have a handout that has a lot more terms on it. Again, this is mini seed school. So we are only choosing the most important ones, but all of those terms in the handout that were sent in the email for this course are primo things to look through and begin to familiarize yourself with on your seed saving journey.
I would say if anyone here is in year 1 through 3, at least year 1, you just want to start by trying to preserve seed.
Yeah.
And if you want to preserve a variety of seed, just remember, stick with the open pollinated varieties. If you get an heirloom variety, even better.
You'll be doing great.
But definitely grow those hybrids if you're trying to produce some nice looking daikon radishes.
Yeah, and then just getting back, I mean, not to repeat what you just said, but to just kind of circle back. When you go to a seed share, for example, a lot of folks maybe haven't done seed saving education, so they're bringing their hybrids from their garden. And so we just need to remember that if you're really excited at a seed share and you get a particular seed, but it's like somebody's hybrid seed from Earl May, whatever, that you're not gonna get what you're looking for, you know, when you grow it out. It's not going to be a stable variety. You're going to get a variety of genetics expressed.
We got the chat.
How do you allow them to only cross-pollinate with other members of theirs?
Of their same variety? I think that's on the next page. So why don't we, all right, okay. So the quick answer to that question is going to be isolation distance, but we're going to get into the details of what isolation distance is, not on this page, but on probably the next page.
Stay tuned.
Okay, so we talked about this a little bit. What are you saving for, preservation or creation? So preservation is a good place to start as a seed saver. And before I jump into that, I'm going to say that the way that you approach saving seeds is going to be very different, whether you're doing it for preservation of a variety or you're trying to create a variety. And so if you look at that handout, the basics of seed saving principles, you'll see that we outlined about 10 basic principles, but how you actually perform those principles will be different depending on what you're saving and why you're saving it. So if you're saving an eggplant versus a squash, you might perform these principles slightly different in each instance. But if you're saving an eggplant for preservation and a different eggplant for creation, you would also approach seed saving 2 different ways in that case. So today we're going to talk a lot about preservation, and next week we're going to talk a lot about creation. And the reason is that I want to talk about just preservation this week and creation next week is that I really want to, if folks want to seed save this year and they want to preserve varieties, I want folks to get that down without all this other information. But all the other information is about creating a variety is super interesting, really exciting, and we're going to dive deep next week. So we'll talk a tiny bit about it today, though. So preservation is a good place to start as a seed saver. The goal of preservation is to save seed that is true to type. So that means that the seed that results in, that the seed that you save creates plants that look like the plant that you saved the seed from. So with my green okra, if I'm saving seed that's true to type, I got this off of a green okra plant that was 6 feet tall. And the seeds inside of here are going to produce green okra plants that are 6 feet tall. That means that the seed is true to type. So to do this, you need to start with open pollinated seed. And so some examples of preserving seed varieties is one that I've been working on for a couple of years is a Stupus tomato. And so that is a tomato that I originally sourced from Seed Savers Exchange. And then for a couple of years, I've been growing that just by maintaining the right isolation distance and the right minimum population. Another example would be banana peppers. So those are varieties that we'd be preserving. Like I said, next week we're going to talk about creation a little bit more, but the short and long of it is that creation is kind of where we become plant breeders. So the goal of creating a variety would be to select for certain traits that you want to have. So like color, taste, drought tolerance, and then you would only save seed from the plants that showed the traits that you were looking for. So if I'm trying to preserve my Stupus tomato, what I want to do is I want to save as many seeds as possible. I want to save seed from as many plants as possible. And if I'm really focused on just preserving this variety, I might even save seeds from some plants that don't show drought tolerance, because while they might not show drought tolerance, they might really stand up to fungal infections well, or something like that. And that might not be something that I'm able to observe in a dry year. So when I'm trying to preserve a variety, if I'm just straight trying to preserve that variety, I would save seed from every type of plant. Now, if I was trying to create a variety, I could weasel a little bit of creation into my preservation technique. So for example, maybe I want to just straight preserve this variety of Stupus. Like I said, I would save seed from as many plants as possible. But if I wanted to select for drought tolerance in a Stupus tomato, I might only save seed from plants, from the 10 plants that showed the most drought tolerance. And then the following year, I would, again, only save seed from the 10 plants that showed the most drought tolerance. So I would still be preserving this variety of Stupus, but I would be kind of tweaking it every year by selecting for drought tolerance as well. So I'd be getting some creation into my preservation. So some examples of different types of buzzwords around like creation of plant varieties would be like hybrids, plant breeding, land-raised vegetables, and we'll talk about that a lot more next week.
Should we do a little thumbs up? How are you doing out there in the audience, Zoom friends? Click your little thumbs up bar.
What's our next?
I'm seeing some. Good job.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I think we're gonna take a break. Okay. So.
Okay. So
we are gonna walk through these questions. This is basically, I don't want to say this is the most important slide because it's not, but this is just like, these are the questions that we've sort of narrowed down here for what you need to know. You've selected your seed, you've sourced your seed, you're ready to go. Now you need to actually understand how to save that seed. And this is something that I think is just really important, because I think a lot of times folks are like, well, I just go out there and I find the seed, right? The end. That's all I need to do to make sure that I'm properly saving this seed. And actually there's a little bit more to it to make sure that you are getting that true to type seed and you're achieving the results that you really want here. So I'm gonna actually figure out how to, I need to minimize this.
okay, yeah. I was gonna say, do we want to talk about minimum population and isolation distance real quick?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so to jump back to the idea of like preservation, there's the question of how do you maintain that a variety only crosses with other plants of that same variety? And the way that you would know that is that you would practice the correct isolation distance. So isolation distance is how far you want to keep plants of one variety from plants of another variety that they could cross with. So the types of things that cross with each other are usually going to be in the same plant family. So for example, a tomato is a Solanum lycopersicum. And so if you see a plant that is a variety of tomato or a variety of Solanum lycopersicum, you would know that those two varieties could cross with each other. So you need to practice the correct isolation distance between those two varieties. Now, eggplants are in the same, are also nightshades. So they're Solanum, but they're Solanum melanginea. I'm butchering my Latin.
Okay, doing great, you're doing great.
So even though they're Solanum, eggplants don't cross with tomatoes. So you can grow an eggplant right next to a tomato and that won't affect those seeds being true to type. So you don't need to practice isolation distance between eggplants and tomatoes, but you do need to practice isolation distance between tomatoes and other tomatoes. Now, every plant has a different isolation distance. So tomatoes, I know off the top of my head, have about a 50-foot isolation distance. So if you had a big garden, you could reasonably grow two varieties of tomatoes for seed in the same garden, just on opposite sides of the garden. So one way to maintain isolation distance is through just literal physical distance. Another example is that corn has an isolation distance of, is it 1 mile? So that means that you want to keep varieties, different varieties of corn, if you're trying to save them from seed, 1 mile apart from each other.
It has to be.
So
it's not cross-pollination.
Right. So that right there, things that are easy to save are things that have small isolation distances because you can more readily achieve that. Now, there are other ways outside of just plain physical distance to achieve isolation distance. And some of those things would be creating barriers. So for example, a lot of peppers, their isolation distance is about 300 feet. But this last year, I did an experiment where I grew one variety of hot pepper in my front yard. And then I grew a different variety of sweet pepper in my backyard with my house in between them and a lot of tall grasses and flowers. My thought is that no bee is going to make it, or wind is going to make it around my house and through the grasses and over the flowers, right? So I'm putting enough obstacles in between them that I think that that isolation distance will stay. Now, the only way I can know for sure is to grow out the seed from the plant, to grow out the seeds that I saved and see, do I get true to type seeds? Another way to achieve isolation distance would be to use row covers. Other ways, so row covers, and you can create, physical blockades like houses, and then you can also create like pollinator blockades. So for example, if I have something short, like maybe cucumbers that I don't have trellised up, or let's say lettuce. Lettuce only gets about 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall when it goes to seed. So if I have one variety of lettuce, and then I have a big fat row of zinnias, and then I have another variety of lettuce, that fat row of zinnias should help give me some buffer. That now lettuce only has an isolation distance of 40 feet, but if I want to be sure, I can also add a buffer of, say, zinnia seeds, or if I have beans that are trellising on a trellis that's 6 feet tall, I could have those between different eggplant varieties, because all of those flowers in between the two varieties is going to provide somewhere else for insects to go before they, if they leave eggplant variety 1, they've got these zinnias and beans to stop at before they hit eggplant variety 2. So those are some of the different ways to achieve isolation distance. Now, the next thing that we really want to be clear on for saving seed is a minimum population. And with isolation distance, we're trying to kind of make sure that the genetic variety in the seed isn't too wide we only want, the genetics from the pollen of one plant to cross with the genetics of the pollen from the other. But with minimum population, we're trying to make sure that our genetics don't get too narrow. So the minimum population is the number of plants that you need to grow out and save seed from to maintain genetic diversity. And that is also going to be different for every plant. So the minimum population for tomatoes is going to be 8 plants. The minimum population for beans is 8 plants. The minimum population for corn is 100 plants. So again, seeds that are easy to save are going to have a small isolation distance and also a small minimum population. So when you're growing out seeds and you want them to be true to type, you got to maintain your isolation distance. And when you're growing out seeds and you want those seeds to be viable and productive and vigorous, you got to make sure that you have your minimum population. So, a minimum population is great, but there's no reason that you can't exceed your minimum population. As long as they're all the same variety, you could, when I grew out my Stupus tomatoes, I had 16 plants. That's twice the minimum population, and that's just going to give me even more genetic variety. So just going to say to maintain a variety, keep that isolation distance. To maintain genetic diversity, keep your minimum population. And when you're thinking about what you're going to grow in your garden this year, think about how big is my garden? And so how much of certain plants can I grow and how far apart can I grow different varieties from each other? So you might only be able to save one variety of a couple different things, but you also want to make sure that if you wanted to save seed from eggplants, that you have enough space in your garden to grow out 12 eggplants. If you want to save seed from beans, just make sure you have enough space in your garden to grow out 8 beans.
Not 8 beans, 8 bean plants.
8 bean plants, 8 bean plants.
Because I was thinking about eggplants would be 8 eggplant plants.
Yeah, 8 eggplant
Just
plants.
to be clear.
And then you want to make sure that you also save seed from each plant.
Yes.
Not just that they're growing in your garden, but that you're saving seed from as many plants as you can. Obviously, if one eggplant really succumbs to disease, you don't have to save seed from that plant. But then next year, maybe just so say you only save seed from 7 eggplants in year 1. In year 2, you have your seed that you successfully saved, but also go ask Cait if she has, or anybody, go ask your neighbor if they have some eggplant seed of the same variety that you can mix in so that you're getting, because if you only save from 7 plants, you're a little bottlenecked, but you can remediate that the following year by sourcing some more eggplant seed from the original source. Say it was True Love seed, just buy a package of eggplant seed and grow out the package of eggplant seed you bought, as well as the eggplant seed that you saved, and then save seed from at least 8 plants that year.
So there, what you're talking about again is this genetic diversity and how important it is for you to have the correct population size of plants so that you are not, that you have a good swath of genetics. And so we'll talk more about that also in breeding in the second night, but this is just like a really important thing to kind of understand. I think is this, I mean, who took plant biology and like genetics? If you did, you probably know a little bit. Sociology. So you probably know a little bit about this, but it's all really good stuff. And I think from here, we are going to take a break in a couple minutes, but let's walk through one seed. And what we want to tell you at this point, while you may be feeling overwhelmed, maybe you don't, maybe you're like, I got this down and feeling good. You don't have to memorize all this stuff. There are charts. So this isn't, you don't have to have all this on lockdown. Like over time, when you practice it, you will. Like Alex can tell you what the isolation distances are for crops that she's growing and saving seed from. That's awesome because she's practicing it and you just kind of get in that rhythm and that knowing.
But 3 years ago, I could not.
Yes. So when you start out, and again, in the handouts that we gave you, so if you are able right now, before we take a little break, let's actually just look at the chart and kind of go through one, and then let's take a break so we can have a second to sort of digest this. But when you have your seed and you know what you want to save, you're going to ask yourself the questions that are here on this screen. But what I'd like you to do, if you're able, to pull up the seed saving chart. It looks like this. We sent it out to you in the email if you received it. So go ahead and kind of take a peek at that. Do you want to pick one of these, Alex? That we can chat about? Yeah, should just do bean.
Yeah, let's do.
Or arugula.
Let's do the seed of the year.
All right. Okay. So we are going to show you this chart here, or you can pull it up to see the more extensive. It's a couple pages long, what we sent to you. You don't have to memorize the isolation distance. You don't have to memorize your minimum population. It's all right here for you. Thank you, Seed Savers, for putting this together. There are other charts out there. If you are a farmer or you're wanting to like scale up your seed saving, the Organic Seed Alliance has an incredible publication. It's just kind of like a holy book on seed saving. It goes really into detail about the growing, the harvest, and the process of different crops. So I'm going to recommend that. It's linked on the resources page. But let's just go ahead and take a look at this chart really quick. We're going to look at bean, your common bean. The scientific name is Phaseolus vulgaris. So again, scientific names are important because for squash, for example, you have slightly different scientific names. It's really important. You need to know which ones are going to cross, which ones are not going to cross. So I would just say, as you are growing crops, as you are a gardener or farmer or whatever, just begin to try and learn some of those scientific names. It's really important. It's also really important for those of you who are native plant seed savers, okay? You need to be practicing those scientific names. The reason is because we have a lot of common and colloquial names and cultural names for these plants. Those are really important. I'm not saying they're not important, but we're going to mix up our species if we're not referring to this like essentially like common language for plants that we can all utilize to make sure we're labeling our species properly. Here we are looking at bean, Phaseolus vulgaris. It is in the plant family Fabaceae. It is an annual. We haven't really discussed that yet, but we're just going to kind of focus on annuals for right now. That means it has one season life cycle, okay? It's an annual. The next one, the next column here is it is primary pollination method, self or insect. So it's a self-pollinator or insect pollinated. And then here's what Alex was talking about. The recommended isolation distance is 10 to 20 feet. So if you're thinking about your garden, you have a small garden, 10 feet, that's super doable. That's what you need for that isolation distance there.
And then you can also, you want to think about your neighbors. If your garden is more than 10 feet from your neighbor's garden, even if they're growing 6 varieties of beans, your variety will be okay.
Yep, you can save that seed. And then these last columns here, population size for viable seed, 1 plant, for variety maintenance, and that's what we're really going to be looking at here, 5 to 10. So pay attention to kind of that middle number on this chart here. That's what you're going to look for like your home garden or your farm. When you're getting into more production, that's when you're going to go onto this column. Let's say you wanting to become a commercial seed grower. So then you're going to say, you know what, if I really want a proper population size for genetic diversity and I'm not having inbreeding depression here, I need over 20 plants to maintain this variety. Okay, so you're looking at that middle column. So that's just walking you through one crop here, okay? So what's really cool about this chart is it's going to show you pretty much like everything you need to know, at least in the planning, answering those questions that we just had on this last slide. So we're going to go ahead and take a break, but first I'm just going to roll through these kind of quickly here just as an overview. So the questions are, what is the plant I want to save? What is the scientific name for that plant? What's my life cycle? Part 2, annual, 1 season, biennial, 1.5 seasons, perennial, that is multiple seasons potentially for that plant to go to seed. It grows for multiple seasons. Some of our perennials still go to seed in 1 season. So we'll talk about that too. But again, refer to the chart or look up your crop so that you know, when is this plant going to have a seed for me? When does it produce the seed? What is the life cycle of reproduction? What's the minimum population that you need? How many plants do I need to plant out if I'm going to save this seed? What do I need to isolate it from? And how much is that isolation distance is the next question. And then when is my seed ready to be harvested? Again, that really depends on each seed. We are going to get into that after the break. But you have to know, you don't want to improperly harvest your seed. You know, is my seed ready? And it's kind of cool this time of year. It's like a lot of questions are coming up like, how do I grow this plant? Or what seed should I buy or whatever. And I love it when we're getting to like when seeds are ready and all the questions and the pictures coming into like my cell phone, like, is this seed ready? Is this seed ready? Can I pick this? You know, so there's a lot to learn. And as you practice it, you will know when that seed is ready. How do you process it? We're going to get into dry processing right after this break. And then how do you properly store it? So these are really those questions that you're going to look at. This is your whole process in a nutshell here. Feel good about it? All right. Let's go ahead, and it is 7:08 to my time currently. It's pretty much 7:10. Let's take a 5-minute break. Okay. So, you know, get up, move around. I know that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drink some water. Give yourself a little break here. And we will pop back on in about 5 minutes to continue talking about how do you get your garden ready for seed saving. It's kind of where we're going to dive in. We're going to show you some hands-on stuff in this second portion as best as we can here in a virtual world. And we're going to do a little bit more practice. Cool. And that's kind of how we're going to wrap up. So go ahead and take a 5-minute break and we'll see you shortly. That was cool. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. It is 7:18, 7:19. We're going to go ahead and dive in here to keep this going. We're a little chilly here in the greenhouse. We had to turn the heater off. So we have our coats on. We're going to stay cozy while we're teaching you. We have, let's see, we had a couple comments in the chat. We're going to do our best to, I guess, lean into our speaker here. And if you're having issues hearing, Lance, how do they turn on the closed captioning? There's a button at the bottom that says live transcript. So we will try to be as clear as we can, but if you are having issues hearing what we're saying, go ahead and click that live transcript. Hopefully that will help out. Also got a comment about isolation distance and thinking a little bit more about that in your garden and how important that is to save properly for your seed. All right. So I'll just jump into the slides and I'll hand it back to you. Does that sound okay? We can kind of bounce back and forth. We're going to talk a little bit here about tending your seed saving garden. That resource that I mentioned earlier that I sent along on page 9 and 10 in the Seed Saving Guide by Seed Alliance. It's the big document. I really like it. It has some great tips on just how to tend your garden and get it ready for seed saving. So one thing I was kind of sharing with Alex during the break is that just because you're saving for seed doesn't mean that you don't want to take care of your plants. You really got to make sure that you have healthy soil. Highly recommend a high quality organic compost and adding that as an amendment to your soil, getting your soil tested, really knowing what's going on with your soil before you are planting, making sure that you're aerating it if possible, using a pitchfork or broad fork, loosening the soil. You want to have healthy plants. And the key to really having healthy plants is having healthy soil and having a living soil. So you can check out a little bit more in that publication, but as you're planting, you want to follow the guidelines for that plant. So if you're wanting to save for seed, it doesn't mean that you're going to cram your rattlesnake bean plants all into a tiny space that's inappropriate for those plants. You need to consider your spacing, that the plants are getting adequate water, and trellising, I think, is really important because in all of this, we're also trying to mitigate, we mentioned this earlier, but you don't want to save seed from unhealthy plants. You don't want to save seed from your plants that are incredibly diseased or have really high pest pressure, etc. So you're really looking for healthy plants here when you're saving.
Yeah, if you trample over anything on the ground, it's not going to be a good plant. So
yeah. So just follow those basic considerations of growing out, making sure you have adequate space. And I think earlier, we're talking about minimum population and isolation. I mean, you need to have a garden plan. I highly recommend that you have a map, you draw it out ahead of time, just possibly a little more intentionality in how you're going about planting, especially when you're saving for seeds, kind of like that added layer, I would say.
Yeah, I guess think about it like with tomatoes. A lot of times people will do tomatoes really close to each other. Guilty. But just thinking about, like we talked about that minimum population, you don't just want to plant 8 tomatoes. You want to save seed from 8 tomatoes. So it follows that you want to be able to tell what plant you're saving from. So you want to have that organization level so that you're not accidentally just picking a bunch of tomatoes from 3 different plants, but rather you can be confident that it came from 8 separate plants. And maybe that means you give it an extra 6 inches of distance than you normally do.
Okay, so when to harvest appropriately, that's really important also. It depends on what life cycle you're working with, what plant you are working with. So, I mean, in general, I would say, go ahead and pick an annual, make it easy on yourself. I have been saving seed for a little bit now, and I'm not successful. I have one time really been successful at saving for a biennial. I don't know what your experience is. I've done a little bit with carrots and kale. Those are like 2.0 and beyond seed saving skills. So, I mean, I would just pick something that is an annual and easy to save. One of the first seeds I actually ever saved was calendula. I don't know if folks are familiar with that. It's an herb, it's a flower. It has a lot of herbal uses, has a beautiful seed. It's very big and large. It's especially easy seed for kiddos to harvest and pick. It's easy to grow. Yeah, it's gnarly looking. It's just a cool seed. The plant is really easy to grow. It's a reseeding annual. It drops tons of seed and likely will come up the following year in the garden. So just throwing out calendula as an idea, as a great plant it's not going to cross with anything. There's just so many, I guess, like awesome benefits to starting with something simple, just to kind of get your feet wet. So you don't have to go all the way over here and pick something that's really, really difficult. Do you want to talk about any?
Yeah, I guess I would just say, some, like just going to annuals and biennials, two things to kind of keep track of when you're saving seeds. So something that you want to ask yourself when you're deciding what to save is how many days until my plant is market ready? So how many days till I'm ready to put it in a bouquet or eat it? And then how many days until it's ready for seed harvest? For some things like a tomato, which we consider generally, we consider red tomatoes market ready when they're also ripe. But if you're a green tomato farmer, then, so if you're a red tomato farmer, the days until your seed is market ready is going to be the same as until it's seed ready. But if you're a green tomato farmer, then the days until your plant is market ready are going to be probably about 15 days difference from when it's seed ready. So something like cucumbers, we're pretty used to eating underripe. I think that's the example you have on here. So, most cucumbers, about 50 days until they're ready for market, but it's something more like 80 days until they're ready for seed. So again, maybe something that's easy to save is also going to have a seed ready date that's not too different from its market ready date. Although, beans and lettuce, both their seed ready date is going to be an additional 15 to 20 days from their market ready date, and they're easy to save. So not always true, but you want to definitely be familiar with when those might be very different times.
I think another really great example of that is squash. So, and also noting, squash, again, I really consider like a greater skill level due to like, you really need to know what your species is there due to cross-pollination. And also off of one plant, for those of you who have grown like winter squashes, for example, you're going to get a pretty limited number of actual squash off of that. So unless you have quite a large space and you're able to have, proper isolation and proper number of squash, it can be a little challenging. And I've, worked with some farmers that were growing to save squash. They really had to have a large space in order to get enough squash for them to both eat the proper population needed for the squash, the proper isolation, because those are crossers. They're going to cross with other, other squash plants, to make sure that they had some that were market ready for eating and leave some on the vine for that, late harvest. So that's just like another example of kind of why it's important for you to know when to harvest your seed.
And one other point on that is when you're planting your garden, you really need to know how many days until your plant is seed ready so that you can plan your garden correctly. Because maybe you've been gardening for 5-10 years and you are a good succession planter, right? So you're probably used to planting lettuce in April and getting it out of there by mid-June. But if you're saving for seed, you can't get your lettuce out of there until more like mid-July. So your succession planting is going to look a little bit different, or just how long you have to keep things in. For example, if you're growing out a biennial, say carrots, you're going to have to leave those carrots in over winter. So that's another reason for planting your seed saving garden, that you really need to know how many days until it's ready to harvest for seed. Yeah, let's move on.
All right. We had our 5-minute break. Okay, we are going to, again, we're going about we got about half an hour here, and we are going to show some dry processing in a second. But first, we're just going to go through a few techniques. So this evening, we're covering dry processing that are basically 2 main ways of processing your seed. So, okay, you picked your seed, you looked up the chart, you planned your garden, you planted that crop out, you're ready to go, you're good. You have an idea of when the seed's going to be ready. You've harvested your seed. So now here we are. What do I do with it?
Okay, so we had our bean, right? It's what type of plant is it? It's a bean. What type of variety is it? It's a rattlesnake bean. Where did I get it? Meadowlark Hearth Farms. I had my isolation distance of 10 feet. I saved seed from at least 6 plants. I saved it in 2021. It took 50 days from when it was planted until it was ready to be eaten as a green bean. It took about 75 days from when it was planted until it was ready to be picked for seed saving. And I knew that because I looked it up, and also I have some experience saving beans. And so I harvested it when it was ready, when it started to dry on the stalk. And now I'm ready to process it.
All right.
So first thing I did was harvest it when it was ready. And then I stored it correctly while I was waiting to process. And so to store it, after I harvested these beans, I went ahead and I kept them in bins with holes in them. So not this bin that it's in right now, but something that has like a little more airflow. Like you can, I don't know if you can tell if there's some
I'm getting
holes
there,
in the bottom
sorry.
of this bin.
Here we go.
But so after I harvested them, I just made sure that they could continue to dry well because I wanted to avoid getting any mold or the seed going down. So now that they're dry, I need to process them. So one way to process dry beans could be to use different tools, but dry beans are so easy to process. And I have so much time on my hands that I'm just gonna go ahead and right now I'm separating the seed from the chaff. That's what we're doing when we're processing. When we wet process, we use water to separate the seed from the rest of the plant material. When we dry process, we do not use water to separate the seed from the plant material. So I'm just gonna use my thumb to pop these beans out. And then I'm gonna toss aside the rest of the plant material. And this is how you process beans. Okay, so another thing that you can process by hand is okra. So this okra, I have all my information written down about it. It's a variety Clemson green. Originally got the Clemson spineless, excuse me. I originally got it from Seed Savers Exchange. Its isolation distance is 300 feet. I achieved that. I saved seed from at least 6 plants. It was saved in 2021. It took about 50 days from when I planted it until it was ready to harvest as immature, delicious pods. It took about another 30, well, depending on summer, 15 to 30 days. In the middle of summer, it only took about 15 days to get ready for seed, but towards the end of the summer, it took about 30 days. So that's also something to keep in mind. And so now to process this, I'm just gonna use my hands, pop it open, and let all these little seeds, oops, it's a hazardous
They're flying
one.
everywhere.
So I'm just popping the seeds out, tossing the chaff, the rest of the plant material. There we go. All right, what else do we got?
Here, I can do this one. I don't have, this is my first year saving this one, but I kind of want to show this example. This is ashwagandha. So this is actually a medicinal herb plant. It's the root that you harvest. So I kind of brought this as an example because I did an interesting thing harvesting this. I actually needed to harvest the root. So that was my market ready part of this crop, okay? But the seeds grow on the stalks. So what I did was I actually pulled up the whole entire plant. I went ahead and cut my roots off so that I could dry them for using for medicine. And then the rest of this, I actually the stalks, the seed was pretty dry already on the plant, but not completely. So I kind of just laid the stalks out for a while. And I want to show this because all seeds are just so different. And this one's cool. For those of you who know like tomatillos, they have that little, the seeds are like inside of a little shell here. And so I just want to say that, you know, identifying your seeds is so important. Like what part is the seed? That's another first step for you as if you're a beginning seed saver. So inside is this little papery husk. That's the word I was looking for, husk. Yeah. And then the seed is actually inside. The seed is this tiny little red little ball in here like this, but that's not even the seed. That is still chaff. Okay. So you have to actually break that open. Then inside, you're not going to be able to see this, but these seeds are about as tiny as little pepper seeds for those that you grow peppers. So there's the chaff and there are the tiny little seeds in there. So I had a pretty big, long process to get this. This is an annual actually. So it's not gonna, at least in our zone it is. It can be a perennial in warmer climates, but here it's an annual. So I've got to get this out of the ground every year if I want to collect the seed off of it. That's kind of a new one that I'm working with right now. So
speaking of knowing what your seed looks like, it's pretty important. So let's do some examples real quick with zinnia seed. So this zinnia seed, I don't know a lot about it. I know that it came from, I know it's a zinnia. I know that it came from zinnias that were multicolored. I don't know what the Latin name is. I haven't looked it up yet. I don't know where the original source was. I, just found it at like a seed share, I think, which is not the best, but I'm saving seed. I'm practicing. I know that this seed originally came from 2019. That's why I always use it at seed saving classes. But when I went to harvest it, I knew that what I was looking for was for once the heads turned dry and brown. And then I went ahead and I used clean clippers and I clipped these zinnia heads into a paper bag. And then I hung this paper bag in a cool, dry place with a lot of airflow. And that helped the heads to continue to dry. So now that I have my zinnias harvested, I need to process the seed. And this process is going to be a little more involved and have more steps than the beans and okra. So I've got these seed heads. I'm going to go ahead and by whatever means, just tear off. Now I know this little cone part, I know that that's not the seed. So I'm going to toss that. I'm going to do another little head. And I know the center cone part isn't the seed, so I'm going to toss that. But now, I'm not sure how well we can see here. Here we go. I've got a bunch of different pieces in here. Some of it is dried petals and some of it is dried seed. Now, a few years ago when I started saving seed, I didn't know that. I just didn't take the time to look. And therefore, when I was saving zinnia seed, I would give people a handful of zinnia seeds and say, look, here's 60 zinnia seeds, but really there's only 20 zinnia seeds there and 40 dried petals. All right, but you live and you learn and you get publicly shamed. No, I'm kidding. You eventually learn what the seed looks like. And so like I told you before, it looks like a little arrowhead. There you go, you can kind of see it. So I know this is what my zinnia seed looks like. All right. Step 24 accomplished. Right. Now I need to separate the seed from the rest of the plant material. And this is going to be a little bit harder. I could just use my hands, but it would take me a while. So I'm going to use seed screens. And the way you use seed screens is however you want to use seed screens. Yes. But all seed screens, they have different meshes. And usually they come with a correlated number. The larger the number, the larger the hole. The smaller the number, the smaller the hole. The reason seed screens have different meshes is because seeds are different sizes. Now, to figure out how to use a seed screen, it's basically just going to be trial and error, but I'm going to give you a real quick cheat sheet because I finally figured out how to process zinnia seeds and separate them from the chaff. So the first thing that I've found that works for me is I grab a number 3 screen and I have my seed and my dried petals together. Now, the number 3 is too small that neither the seeds nor the petals will go through. But what I noticed is that if I really rub the seed on here, what happens is the petals, they kind of get cut in half and fall through, but the zinnia seeds, they don't break at all. So after a few minutes of rubbing them on a number 3 screen, I have a lot less chaff on here than I had before. Toss my chaff. Grab a different screen. This one's a number 2, so the mesh is a little bit bigger. And then I take the results from my number 3 screen, throw them on my number 2 screen, which has holes that are just big enough for the zinnia seeds, but the chaff that's left is too big to get through the holes. Now, if I shake it, it doesn't work, but if I smack it, just the zinnia seeds pop through. Toss the rest of my chaff.
Oh yeah.
I have significantly less chaff, a lot more zinnia seeds, but I have a couple pieces of chaff left. But what I have now is chaff that is so light that when I winnow this in front of a fan about 3 or 4 times, and so winnowing would be where I would have a fan's air coming and I would drop the seed from one bowl into the next. And with the fan, it would knock off these lighter pieces of chaff. And I would just do that in front of the fan. I found that doing it about 3 times would get rid of enough chaff that if I did it 4 times, I didn't get rid of any more. So 3 was the magic number. And that is how I clean zinnia seed. So you might ask, why wouldn't I just start winnowing it with the fan at first? And it would be because a lot of the chaff that I got rid of was the same weight as the seed. So if I just winnowed it without using the screens, I wouldn't have gotten rid of that chaff. So some of the chaff I had to use the screens to get rid of, and then some I could use the fan to get rid of. So that's another example of dry process.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So just to cover a few things here, Alex, that was awesome. Alex mentioned that dry processing, so we are harvesting the plant and the seed when it is fully brittle and brown and dry. So you really, you don't want to harvest on a wet day. When it's raining, when it's pouring rain, you know, it must be dry. It must be ideally dry on the plant. Now, there are times when you just aren't going to get that. Let's say a frost is coming, or you've got to get that seed out of your garden or out of the field. The best thing to do is at that point is to actually pull up as much of the plant as you can. So truly like the whole plant with the roots, and then hang it to dry it down, okay? But let's say like you're on top of your seed saving garden and your plants, and we're having a dry fall, and you're remembering that you need to get out there and harvest and checking it. And so you are harvesting when stuff's dry. That's number one. That's the most ideal thing. The other little tidbit I want to throw in with dry processing and dry saving is that things like lettuce or other things that are going to move with the wind, you've got to watch them like daily. So you can't really mess around. You can't leave your seed saving garden to like its own devices, because once that seed is dry and ready, especially with a lot of those prairie species, it's going to blow right off your stalk and it's gone. You lost your seed, you don't have it. The first year I was growing El Campaign, which is a plant I really love. I brought some of the seed. I don't know where it is right now, but super fuzzy. Blazing Star is another example. I was like, I knew it was ready. It was dry. I was like, okay, it's time to harvest. I'm gonna get out there. I didn't do it that day. I didn't do that day when I was on the farm. I did it I went back out like a day later, gone. All of my seed had dropped. I was just like, of course, that's what happened. So, I mean, that's just something that can happen. I'm going to go through a couple other methods. As Alex said, it's really trial and error. This is a very hands-on process. There's no like book that's going to tell you exactly what screen or exactly what process for anything. And the seed savers that I've met have been doing it for like years. You know, one that we met, I thought was so cool. He's, you know, seed farmer. He's like, it's a dance. Like it literally is a dance. It's like, I am dancing with these seeds, trying to shake them out of their pods, trying to find the best way. And I learned the dance in my body. Like I physically learn it. It commits to muscle memory, and then I can do it the following season. I think that's what Alex is saying also, is like, it took a lot of seasons, right, for you to get to that point. So I'm just going to go over a couple that I want to highlight, which is, this is Anise hyssa. So something that kind of has a stalk like this with really, really tiny seeds. I'm not even going to try to show you the seeds. This is not the seed, by the way. These are the seed pods. This is all chaff. The seeds are inside here. Another great example is yarrow. Another great example is blue vervain. But I cut off the entire stalks. And what I like to do with these actually is have a plate or a bowl, preferably that's white or light colored, and to tap. I literally just go ahead and, yeah, like tap these. I don't know. Actually, I think all the seeds in the bottom of the bag. Oh no, there we go. So I'm not going to show you. Again, they're like super tiny, but I can kind of show you this process of just tapping these into a bowl. I'm getting a lot of chaff because I'm being messy about it right now. But that's a great thing for anything where you have like a pod that's kind of like this and you know there's going to be itty bitty seeds.
And that's great because you don't have to.
Yeah, you don't want to, because I don't want to break up my chaff so it's like a fine dust.
Makes it hard.
And then I'm like, wait, I can't even see my seeds. But as Alex mentioned, also winnowing, you know, these are all like really old processes that we've been doing as humans for a really long time, like that you probably saw, I don't know, in books or on like black and white videos when you were a kid or
Goes West,
something. Yeah, 5 Goes West kind of stuff. And so, you know, but like we've learned, you know, we used to be out there with like the blanket and the sheet and the flail, and tarps work really well for seed saving. So that you don't have to have like high technology or a lot of money to do this stuff. You really just need to grow it right, harvest it at the proper time, and be able to identify the seed. So we talked about bees earlier, and I wanted to highlight this one because Lance is here, and this is one of his favorites, I know, to process, which is the cone flowers. This is Echinacea purpurea specifically, but these are really, really spiny. And what I like to do actually is I like to just harvest them out on the plant. I've figured out a way to like actually move the spines with my thumb so I don't bleed. And it's really just like how I break it off of the stem without like coming in straight at the points. So again, I mean, just from doing it, it doesn't hurt to do it this way, but a lot of folks actually process these with hammers. That's what you use, right? Lance, just kind of hammer the pods. And so, I mean, you got hammers around, you got a bucket of these, go for it. I know, but I also think it's kind of like fun, you know, there's a little bit of like,
That's a strong thumb.
I know, right? They're my grandpa's thumbs. So yeah. Someone said looks like dried basil flowers. Absolutely. So basil are another one. The seed's a little bit bigger there, but again, they have that stalk on the top of the plant. You really want to make sure that they're completely dried down. I've seen a lot of folks go out and try to clip basil seeds. They're like, oh, but the pod is there and the seed's in there. So in general, your seed is ready when they call this the fingernail test. But when you take the seed, you know, between your thumb and your finger or whatever, and you try to break it, if you can make like a dent into that seed, it's not ready. So that means there's moisture in the seed. It can dent, it can make an impression. So when you can make an impression in a seed, it's still not dried down enough. So the fingernail test is that it's brittle. It either snaps and breaks depending on what type of seed it is. Obviously, if you're like doing okra seed or corn seed or something like that, you can't snap it with your fingernail, but it's not going to make a dent when you're pressing on that seed. So, I mean, very scientific, the fingernail test.
Yeah, totally.
But it's all good. We had some, I would use pot holders to break thorny pods. Absolutely. That's a great one. Someone also said that they had some, we're troubleshooting some spaghetti squash. They planted them again and they ended up with half spaghetti, half zucchini squash. Yeah, so that can also be super fun. I grow like these little ornamental pumpkins that turn out different every year, you know, different colors and stripes, and you never know what you're gonna get. Actually, they grow out of the compost pile. So that can be really fun too. Okay, I'm gonna go back to our screen here, if I can get the mouse to participate, just so we can make sure this is not working. There you go. There we go. Okay, so back to just tools and equipment that you might want to have for dry processing. Paper bags, Sharpies. Make sure you label. Label. If you leave this class with anything this evening,
let it be a Sharpie and some
please let it be label, know the scientific name, and record keep. Those honestly, I think, are like, before you start any of this, like tangibly in the real garden and farming world, just know that taking notes and taking records and keeping track is going to make you better at this. So I just like want to encourage you to get into a good practice of doing that. I remember, and yes, Lance just chimed in from across the greenhouse. You will not remember. You will put plants in a bag, in a paper bag, in a cubby, in your sock drawer. I don't know. And you're going to be like, I'm going to know what species this is. I'm going to know what plant I harvested, you know, and no, you won't. So,
and I think when it comes to record keeping, even if you don't, like I was saying with those zinnias, like I don't know everything about them, it's still good to know what you don't know. Yeah. Because not only will that help you communicate that to whoever's planting that seed out, whether it be you or you're sharing it with someone, but it will also help you figure out what you need to observe, what you need to pay more attention to next time. Yeah. Because yeah, it's going to be hard to do all 20 steps correctly the first year, but if you do the first 10 and correct, and then you do 11 and 12 a little off, if you record keep that, it'll make it easier to do steps 11 and 12 differently next year. Mm-hmm. And just a quick point, we're going to send this out later, but we do have an observation form that has questions that you want to keep track of, like what type of plant is it, what variety, what's the original source, the isolation distance, the minimum population. So we do have observation sheets that you can download and use to keep track of things. The importance of keeping track, it makes you a better seed saver in the long term. And also, I think something that we're designing our seed saving classes for is community-based seed systems. And so with community-based seed systems, we're looking for stuff that is going to be reliable, productive, and delicious. So that's why we want to keep track of what we're doing. And we also want to keep track so that others can do it and so that others can see what's been done. And if we ever lose a variety, we might be able to create it again. And so also on that same note of like reliable, productive, and delicious, you also want to be able, when you're sharing your seed, to let others know what to expect. Yeah. So think about all the information that you wish seed packets had on them and keep that information on your observation.
Yeah. We're just going to throw out a couple recommendations. We've kind of talked about a few along the way, but we talked about beans a lot. And I mean, there is a reason why they're like seed of the year, and they are easy to save. When you're, again, isolation and your minimum population, they're a great one to start with. And, you know, like I just throw out an example. My parents have like a tiny raised bed garden that they're doing awesome at. And, you know, they saved their own seed this year and they saved bean seed and they did a great job. And it's very easy. If you have one raised bed, you can still be a seed saver. That's what's so cool about it. Lettuce is really easy. My experience with that is it's a flyaway, though. Again, you really got to check it when it's ready. Otherwise, you might lose all of your seed. Arugula, there's lots of grains that are easy. I mean, a lot of folks that I meet have saved flower seeds. You know, they're really familiar with saving flower seeds, the annual flowers. So that's really easy. Besides this, there's one other thing that I'd really like to send folks. So the sheet Alex was talking about where you can collect all your data or observations, answer those questions for seed saving is there is a seed harvest seed saving guide for prairie natives. So I know a lot of folks on here are really interested in that. It actually shows pictures of what the seed looks like. So besides just being out in the prairie and learning the seeds that way, I also learned by looking at these publications so that I could identify what is chaff and what is seed. Because with some of these friends, it's like really hard. It's really hard to know, like, is that the seed? Is that the seed? I'm not really sure what the seed is. How big is the seed? It even has like a little rule measure at the bottom. There's something we should do for the seed bank. That'd be cool. That shows you this actual size of the seed as well. So you really know what you're looking for. We already talked about the fingernail test, which is on this slide. Herbs are really easy to save for. Okay. We kind of walked through this already. So I don't know if do we want to take one from the audience to kind of walk through? Sure. Okay, we are going to wrap this up because truly we're almost at time, which is wild, but that's what happens. Is there anyone here that would like to put into the chat, you know, something they really want to, oh, I already saw something pop up. Something yep, Lance is saving some stuff. dried basil. Okay, anyone have a seed they're just dying to save this season? Give us your information. Da-da-da. Yeah, what is that song? Like,
That's Herb Albert.
what do you want to save this year, audience? Tomato, a pepper, a prairie seed. What do you want to save, Lance? A turnip.
Turnip.
All right.
All right. That's a biennial, right?
Yes,
No,
it's a
that's
bi.
not biennial.
No, they're biennial.
Okay.
Pretty sure. Yes, we can go to our chart. Grade 1, turnip. Does anyone have a second option? We'll go through the turnip, but anyone else? What about thinking of my garden? Something I've yet to save. We have cucumber. Okay, let's do cucumber and turnip. Those are really great. Okay, so, and a snow pea. Oh, snow pea. Okay, out of those 3, I'm gonna let you say, Alex, but if the choices were turnip, cucumber, and snow pea, I would say everyone start with the snow pea.
Yeah.
Snow pea, you can do that. Okay, these are great ones. We're gonna have to put the chart though here, I think. So
Let's start with the snow.
okay, we're gonna start with the snow pea. So keep these questions in mind. We're gonna walk through them. I'm gonna go ahead and do this here. And
So first thing with the snow pea you want to think about is, so
where are you gonna get your seed?
yeah. Let's
Oops.
get our seed from, are you gonna go look something up?
No, I'm just gonna try to.
So
Yeah,
first thing you think of is where we're gonna get our seed.
Meadowlark Hearth Farms.
Perfect, love it.
Okay,
Okay. And so what type of plant? It's a pea, the variety, snow pea.
mhm.
Maybe we'll say it's the variety is what was the seed of the year a few years ago? Little giant snow pea, Swiss giant.
Swiss giant.
So say Swiss giant is the variety. What's the Latin name?
The
for
Latin
peas?
name for peas is Pisum sativum
All righty. The original source would be Meadowlark Hearth Farms.
farms. It's a Fabaceae. Peas are in the legume family, Fabaceae.
Okay, so what's the isolation distance?
The isolation distance of a snow pea is 10 to 20 feet.
Okay, so do you have room for that in your garden? What's the minimum population?
5 to 10 plants. So let's say 5 or 7. You need 7 snow pea plants.
That feels doable.
Yeah, that are isolated from any other Pisum sativum.
Which I'm not planning on growing any.
Yeah, so you're only going to grow one variety of your snow pea. It's
So-
an annual.
It's
You
an
know
annual.
that?
Yep. And so how many days until it's ready for market? You would read that on the seed packet, but it's probably gonna be like 45, 50.
And that is sometimes not spelled out super clearly. So if you ever see anything that says date to maturity, sometimes it also has an abbreviation. I can't think of, I haven't looked at commercial seed packets for a
Sometimes
while.
it'll just say like 45 days from seed, 30 from transplant.
Yes, but it will tell you when it's ready, how many days.
And then how many days until it's ready to harvest for seed? Probably an additional 2 to 3 weeks. So if it was 50 days until it's market ready, it's probably going to be 65, 70 until it's ready to be harvested. And then you might want to look a picture of what pea seeds look like when they're ready to be harvested.
This is a good fingernail test one
Yeah.
because the pod, you want it to be totally brown and dried on the vine, but also like I've picked brown dried pea pods before and then opened it up and all of those seeds are not ready. So again, they're not hard. I can make an indent with my fingernail. They still have moisture in them. They're not viable seed at that point. So not ready.
So then I'm gonna like properly take care of my garden, make sure there's plenty of compost. And I'm gonna have to think about this, like, am I trying to preserve this variety for the sake of this purpose? Yes, I am. So I know that I'm gonna want to make sure, I'm gonna want to trellis my peas. I'm gonna want to keep them far enough apart that I can tell that I'm harvesting pea pods from at least 7 different plants when they're ready. And then when it comes time to harvest them, I need to know how to do that. And since beans and peas are pretty similar, I'm gonna kind of harvest the peas the same way, either into a paper bag or a tote that has holes in it. And then I'm gonna make sure that while I'm storing them until they're ready to process, that they're in a place where they get plenty of airflow. And then when it comes time to process them, I'm just gonna mess around and I'm gonna ask someone, and I'm gonna figure out that processing peas is gonna look a lot like processing those beans. I'm just gonna crack the pod open, pop the seeds out into one bowl and toss the chaff into another. And how am I gonna store those?
Okay, so there's a couple ways to store, but you need dry, cool, and dark. This is really important. We're going to cover it next in the following night a little bit more.
All the opposite from what you need to grow something.
Yes. So you don't want moisture. You don't want it to be humid. You don't want to put it in your bathroom. You don't want to put it in your kitchen. Garages can be okay, depends on moisture level. I ideally like to store all of my seed in paper seed packets, brown paper sacks, in a airtight, dark, so not things that like sunlight is going to get to, in a dark colored tote. Alex had some awesome dark colored totes here. We were talking about how when you're a seed saver, you have a lot of totes at your house or farm or whatever. So in a dark container, in paper bags or envelopes. I don't like to put seed in plastic unless it's like I'm just picking it out and then I'm gonna process it and then transfer it to paper. I just don't like any moisture, and it needs to be cool.
And a good thing about like having the airflow is that sometimes there is a little bit of moisture in those seeds. So if you have them in things like paper bags, paper packages, that allows that moisture to escape. Whereas if you have it in something like plastic, it can't escape. I store all of my seeds in mason jars, but I also pop my mason jars a couple of times. Like I'll start storing the seeds in October, but I'll pop those mason jars in December and February to just get any last bits of moisture out.
Okay, we are at time.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna wrap this up. Turnip and cucumber, we love you and we care about you. Go ahead and take a peek at the chart. Turnip, again, 2.0, that's a biennial. We can talk about those next session. So we will get to that. I just want to wrap this up really quick with a couple announcements before we say farewell. And if I can share here. Get quicker. Clicking. All right. Here's our information. If you have questions, get in touch with us. Jot this down real quick because I'm going to flip to the next one. There's some awesome stuff coming up, but I just want to highlight right now so that we can say farewell and honor your time and what you have going on, and that we've had a lot of information. Thank you for all the questions in the chat. There are 2 seed shares, well, a seed bank opening in Council Bluffs on Saturday, March 5th. The time is to be determined. Hopefully we'll have more updates in the future. We can send that out. We'll also be in communication with you via this group email that Lance has sent out. We have your contact info. If you can't get in touch with us, you can be in touch with Lance, who sent you the handouts. We'll be sending you a couple more things. There is another seed share in Omaha Saturday, March 5th, 10 to 4 at Fabric Lab in North O. So check that out as well. Any last thoughts, Alex?
There's going to be a lot of locally saved seed at that seed share.
Yes.
Sign up for the next webinar.
Yes.
It's coming up in, I think, next week.
Couple weeks too,
couple
I think.
weeks.
Yeah.
And then we can also make sure that you have access to a recording of this. And if anyone wants a slideshow, we can go ahead and download that and send that out to people as well. And we'll be sending along the observation forms as well as the guide to prairie seed saving.
Yes. Really quick answer to the pole bean question. Yes, possibly. The question there with your pole beans that are still in your garden over winter is whether the seed is still viable. It has gone through a lot of moisture. So you're going to want to do a germination test. We are going to talk about that in the second session. We don't have time now. We just want to say thank you so much for being here. This is recorded, so you can watch it again. Thanks for putting up with the lightning round of mini seed school. As you can tell, there's so much to learn. We're excited about the next one, and
email us with questions, thoughts, concerns.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm seeing all the thanks and have a great night. Take care out there. And maybe our next one will be able to be in person. We'll kind of play it by ear. So take care and save some seeds.
Bye.
Lance, do you have anything you want to say?
No, thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks. Farewell.
Should we wait for it to stop recording before we